Yeah, we're going to talk about Star Trek Online. And this is going to be a really fun panel with an experience to actually talk to some of the devs. So we got three of them here backstage. Why don't you guys come on out? We have Thomas Maroney, who's the lead ship artist for Star Trek Online. We got Jeremy Wren, who's the lead systems designer. And Ryan Letter, who is the content designer. And you definitely want to stick around at the end of this panel. We're going to have time for people to ask questions. We really want this to be like an interactive thing with you guys. So we are going to be giving away t-shirts to the first 5 people who come up and ask a question. So definitely get in on that. All right, so yeah, welcome guys. Thanks for doing this. This is going to be pretty cool. So there's a few things we want to talk about today. And first of all, you know, there's probably people in the audience that sort of having various levels of knowledge about the game. So I kind of wanted to talk to each of you guys about just kind of broad strokes. You know, what is Star Trek Online for someone who's either never played it or maybe has kind of a passive knowledge of it.
I'm curious how many players we have out there right now that have already played. Most of you, yeah. Anybody never played Star Trek Online? Great. So Star Trek Online is basically the only online RPG set within the Star Trek universe, where you can play as a captain of your own ship, kind of as the star of your own Star Trek series in a way. You play through, we have hundreds of hours of content missions, including voice actors from all of the various series and everything. And it's your chance to, I think our tagline is that you explore the Star Trek universe from within.
And currently, I believe we have more episodes in our game than any series of Star Trek up to now.
That just happened with our release of Victory's Life. Our DS9 game expansion just came out this summer. I think we crossed that threshold then.
So I guess, is it fair to say that Star Trek Online is sort of like canon light?
Yeah, so the only official hard canon is TV shows and movies. Everything else kind of falls under Apocrypha. But we work really closely with CBS. They do make sure that we're not ruining any of their IP. So we don't want to. I mean, we really want to. We love the IP. So we are pretty much about as equal as the novels are. And I think moving forward, especially with the Age of Discovery, that we'll be talking about a bit later, we're about as close to the hard canon as soft canon we get. So it's really cool.
One of the great things about the setting of Star Trek Online is that it's set about 30 to 40 years after Nemesis and after Voyager in the Prime timeline. And it's the only real visual interactive media that takes place in that timeline. And we have over 40 Star Trek characters, actors that reprise their roles. So you can see what Kira's up to, what Odo's up to. You know, look into the future of these characters and see what they've become, what they're doing, and interact with them. And it was a decision that I think Cryptic made early on with the game that really paid a lot of dividends. Opened a lot of doors for us for storytelling purposes to tie up a lot of loose ends.
And just to kind of behind the scenes as well, we're set 30 years after those shows, and in real life it's 30 years after most of those shows.
Right, yeah.
So we try to get in touch with the actors to come and play those roles. They're reprising it kind of in time with the lockstep in actual temporal.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think all of the characters that from the show that are integrated into Star Trek Online is one of the things that makes it really unique in terms of just games in general. I think there's just so many people reprising their roles, doing voice acting and voice work, and playing their characters, and you get to interact with them. You can just walk up to them and talk to them. But let's also talk a bit about the player characters. So Jeremy, I wanted to ask you, because part of the fun of an MMO is building your player and customizing him. Yeah. So walk me through some of what you've done as a designer that makes the player feel like a Star Trek captain.
Oh, yeah, I think this is one of the areas where Star Trek Online absolutely shines. Fulfilling the fantasy of you being the captain of your own ship, leading your own Star Trek adventure, really relies heavily on you being able to customize so many elements of it so that it is yours. You're not just generic captain number 47. You're actually you, and you have your own personal ship that you can customize, your bridge crew that you can customize, your own uniform, and aside from just the visuals as well, the gameplay offers a huge variety of choices in how you approach combat or doing so many different activities in the game. There are, I couldn't even begin to describe the number of different permutations of different build types or weapon options or equipment options or species that you can play. So like we have over 30 species in our game that you can play across the 5 different factions, and there's even more of that for your bridge officers. There's bridge officer species you can't actually be yourself as well. So there are so many options. I like to say that it's a bit akin to like a card collecting game where you take bits and pieces of different types of mechanics and different ways that you can play the game and kind of put them together to form your deck, which in this case is your ship, your crew, all of their abilities and all of the equipment attached to all of that. It's hugely customizable. Honestly, it can be probably a little overwhelming, but it's also an extremely rich experience.
So kind of building on that, there's kind of 2 parts to the gameplay of Star Trek Online, which is another thing that makes it unique. You have the space game, and you have the planet game, where you're on the surface as a person, and then you have you're in your ship. So Thomas, you're the lead ship artist. So what can you tell me if I'm going to Star Trek Online? You know, what if I want to fly my favorite ship?
Well, you can.
That's the short answer.
Right, yeah, the short answer is you can. I mean,
There's like a stupid number of ships.
yeah, there are over 800 ships, and looking at how different stats and stuff right now, there are 800 ships in the game.
Just drop the mic right now.
Right.
Yeah, panel's over, there are 800 ships, good night.
Right, exactly. But that's across, I guess we're up to 5 factions now, between Starfleet, TOS, Starfleet, Klingons, Romulans, and Dominion. And then with Age of Discovery coming up soon, we'll have a Discovery starting experience as well. So we've got a lot of ships across every iteration of Star Trek, including the Kelvin timeline. We have the Kelvin Constitution. We have ships inspired by the Narada. We've got stuff from Next Generation, Voyager, Klingon ships, Romulan ships. It's all in there. So it's very exciting if you want to fly a particular Star Trek ship in Star Trek Online. Chances are it's there. It's ready, waiting for you. And really, it speaks to a point about my passion as a ship artist. Is that the ships, they're not just things. The Enterprise is a character. The Defiant is a character as much as the other, Captain Sisko or Captain Janeway or whatever. So I feel that very strongly about players in Star Trek Online when they pick out their favorite ships and they customize it and you can name your ships.
Make the registry numbers.
Yeah, pick the registry number. You can make them your own, and it's part of your Star Trek adventure, and it's a character you can create and dote over and things like that. So it's a really big part of the game.
And if you're thinking, 800 ships, I mean, they've got to be running out of ideas now. Well, one great thing is we've been watching Discovery at work, and after the battle of binary stars, we've all looked at Thomas and we're like, so, guess you're making all of these now, huh?
Thankfully, it's not just me. I have a great team. We've got Hector Ortiz as concept artist, and then we've got Ian Richards and Mo Tatarina as 2 other ship artists on the game. They're not here this week, but they do fantastic work.
So, just kind of still talking a little bit about the general stuff here before we dive into some specifics about the new stuff in the game. Brian, I had a question for you about the content of the game itself and some of the characters that we encounter. So my question from your perspective as sort of a behind-the-scenes guy, how have you recreated the Star Trek universe in video game form? I know it's a huge question, but...
Well, so one great thing about Star Trek in general is that there's a lot of little holes here and there throughout the shows. There's only so much that they can put into an hour episode, especially when you put commercials in there as well. So we have a lot of wiggle room to kind of fill those holes. So we will often start with a plot line that never got resolved, like what happened with the bottom line. And then we can then create a story that continues that story, that is probably using the word story too many times, and we start finding characters from the show that we can bring back. So we were able to bring in half the cast of Voyager and then actually explore the tale of Claude Noir much more to completion. And you know, the talent that we work with, the actual actors from the show, are amazing. Like, for the most part, it's as if they never took their costumes off. They embody these characters, and I mean, it makes sense. After being the character for 7 years, and then coming to these conventions, and everyone talking to them about their character, like, they like eat and breathe like these characters, and it's really awesome seeing the passion that they bring when we're working with them.
And so professional too.
Yeah.
But so many of them are just like, yep, ready to go, and right back in character. It's
Like they don't even miss a beat.
And for us that get to listen in on some of these recording sessions, it's like chills.
Yeah.
I remember listening to, like,
What a personal job.
we got like an email, like, Jenny Ryan's recording right now, and so like a bunch of us went to the door of the audio, the audio office, and like stuck right here next to the door, and listening to her do some dialogue for 7 of 9 was pretty exciting. You know, we just, every time we bring somebody in, sometimes they actually come to our studio and we get to meet them, and they're really nice, very sweet, and sometimes they record remotely, but we can still hear them through closed doors and stuff, and it's always an experience.
But Ryan's got a leg up on the two of us in that regard. Some of his words actually get into their mouths.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's really cool because I think I'd never been to one of the recording sessions, and I mentioned that to Al, and Al was like, you know, come on in. We have Andrew Robinson doing some narrative work, and he's like, you know, don't say anything, you know, let them all do their work. So I'm sitting there on the couch, you know, biting my tongue, and Andrew starts reading the lines of, you know, come with me to how to school, and I'm like, yes, Derek, I will go with you. But I'm not going to say that. But I'm thinking it. But it's amazing. They are so good at what they do.
That's awesome. That kind of leads me like right into a question that I have for you guys, kind of talking about not only Star Trek Online in general, but I do want to dive into some of the new stuff in Star Trek Online. That's Victory is Life, which is the Deep Space Nine edition, and then Age of Discovery, which was just recently announced, which is going to be all of the Discovery content. I think you're calling it ongoing saga.
Yes.
It's going to be multiple installments of Discovery stuff. And talking about the actors and being able to see them do this work and how amazing that is, I'm curious, what were the actors' reactions? You're saying that they're stepping right back into these roles, but is it almost just like a business relationship, or, you know, are some of them, did some of them react differently? Maybe, like, they're just excited to be back in the office?
I mean, they're extremely professional. So, you know, they'll come in and often they'll just be, you know, okay, you know, I'm ready to do this. Of course, Jeffrey Combs decided to start his session by just talking as Grunt, like just, you know,
Just ad lib.
yeah, ad-libbing Grunt for fun of it, and I mean, he's amazing.
It starts there. I don't think we've ever had an actor that we brought in that was anything less than just a complete professional.
Yeah.
But there are also those that get so excited about it. Aaron Eisenberg and Chase Masterson joined us on stage on the panel yesterday. And they get so into it. They're back in the character and they love it. And Aaron even came and did a live stream with us where he just played through the episode where Nog was featured.
And he brought his tea.
And he brought his tea, yeah. Some of the Ferengis have
Right, I want to
that
bring
is,
that up. One of my favorite stories about getting ready for Victory's Life and trying to nail down who exactly was going to be in it. And obviously wanted all the Ferengi, so that means Quark too, right? As kind of the anchor of the whole Ferengi crew. But Armin, he wanted to be involved, but he didn't want to do it without his teeth. And so part of our contract was getting somebody to make new Ferengi teeth for him. And we did it, and we got it, and it sounds great. It sounds great in the game. It adds so much to Victory's Life. Yeah.
It's incredible. I can imagine just like, they can't speak the words if their mouth feels wrong.
Right, exactly.
But it's also really cool because they, like, when we send them a script, all they have is a script. So then we get experiences where we get to bring them in, or like yesterday I got to show Ed Robinson footage of the game. Like, actually I let him through a bit of it at our booth, and they finally get to see the final product, and it blows them away because, you know, we try so hard to get their mannerisms. Our animator, Weston Pierce, like, just completely nailed all of Garrett's mannerisms.
and required creating a whole set of like default stances.
Yeah.
And talking animations, just to, you know, little head quirks.
Yeah, it was amazing. We showed Andrew Robinson that cutscene yesterday at our booth, and it was cool to see he had an emotional reaction to what was happening in the game. And like, there's a moment where Kira slaps Odo, and then the camera cuts to Garrett, and Garrett has this big smile on his face. And Andrew Robinson, like, Garrett enjoyed that. You know, he said that about it. It's like that felt so good to us as people who love the show and these characters so much that the person who portrayed Garrett identified with what we were doing with the character, and it felt authentic to him. I mean, holy cow, right? Like that's such an honor.
Well, something I definitely wanted to bring up is just, especially talking about, where we're going forward from here, the new content, integrating Discovery in with the game. A lot of Trekkies worry about new Star Trek stuff coming out because it's this beloved thing in our hearts, right? And we worry about who's got the keys to the franchise and making the decisions. And like, these guys get it. Like, Star Trek Online, you can just see the passion that these guys have for the game. And from the people that I know from like the other parts of your team, that's universal. So it's pretty amazing to I for one, I'm a pretty tough sell, but I for one, I'm like very happy for these guys to be in charge of what's going on, like the Discovery stuff.
I personally had to kind of deal with that already with Victory's Life because, the Quark's Lucky 7 mission was very different from everything that we've done. And as we all know, in fandom, sometimes fans really hate change. They just despise it. So I knew right from the bat that this was going to be either beloved or completely despised.
It was a big risk. There's this, in the midst of this really horrific war that's going on with this alien race that are just swarming across the Gamma Quadrant. We have essentially a heist. Like a comedy heist in the middle of this arc. It's a big risk just from even a storytelling standpoint to try and pull that off. But our fans have responded very positively to it. I think in no small part thanks to the acting done by the film and Kirby.
But also I think that in part that it's because you respected the DS9 property that DS9 in the middle of a horrible war would throw in these silly Ferengi episodes, and if anything, that the weirdness of Quark's Lucky 7 really harkens to that.
Yeah.
So I like to think that we will do Discovery justice, but at the same time, while we're doing Discovery justice, we'll be doing our fans justice as well.
So I want to talk for just a couple of minutes about some of the details of Age of Discovery. So just give me the rundown. What's the story going to be, and how is that going to build into the canon from what we've seen on screen so far?
Well, Age of Discovery is the name of this, as you said, multi-part release. The first part of that will be coming out this fall. We're creating a new starting experience, sort of like what we did with our original series era stuff a couple years ago when we were celebrating the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, where you'll create a Starfleet cadet in the Discovery era who will be graduating from Starfleet Academy. They'll be teaming up with Cadet Tilly, played by Mary Wiseman. We're so excited to have her join us as a member of Star Trek Online's cast. We don't want to get too into the weeds with details right now, but it's going to take place after the Battle of Binary Stars, and so we're going to be able to kind of fill in some of the gaps of the Klingon War. You saw some of that in the show, but a lot of it was Discovery was out doing its own thing, or it was in the Mirror Universe while all that was going on, and so we're going to be able to use Jalula as kind of an antagonist and portray some of the things that happened there.
Jalula is a character from one of the comics that CBS has worked with another licensor,
IDW, yeah. The Light of Kalis, I think is the name of that arc that they did.
So we got in touch with them and we're starting to talk about what stories we wanted to do, who we could feature. They actually offered this up to us as a character which is amazing to us to get something back from them in this way. And so we've been working with them to kind of flesh out this character as the primary antagonist of at least the starting experience in the first few missions that we're doing.
And one really cool thing is that, so the Battle of Binary Stars happens in 2256. Now, for any of you Star Trek buffs,
There
might be a couple in the audience, yeah. The year that James T. Kirk graduated from the Academy was 2257. So you will actually be his senior, which means you're all cooler than Kirk.
So I do want to open up the questions pretty soon. So if you guys do have questions for us, and we are giving away t-shirts to the first 5 people who ask the questions, so please, yeah, step on up to the mic. While you guys are getting up there, I do have some questions from our readers at TruckTV.com. So I'm going to start us off with this one, which is maybe my favorite. Duncan Idaho 11 asks, when
He's
will
a common, he shows up to our live streams.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Love them.
Hey Duncan, how's it going? Shout out to Duncan. He asks, when will there be a flyable T6 tardigrade?
That's a ship question.
We don't talk about future content.
Yeah, I don't know about a flyable tardigrade, but
He's also sent a picture with a design that
Yes,
he has.
of course he did.
Yeah, we should have that in the presentation.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you're interested in tardigrades, you might want to come to the panel tomorrow. I'm just saying, that might be a thing. You might want to come to 10:30 here in this room. We'll be talking about agent discovery, which may or may not include tardigrades.
So we've been asked to be a little tight about it, so they can have all the fun with the big announcements.
Definitely come back here at 10:30. Also, real quick announcement that these guys are giving away codes for bridge officers at their booth, so come on down into the vendor's room.
Well, if we're doing announcements, there's also a Meet the Devs tonight at the iBar. I think at Mike.
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock at the iBar.
I told you like 6:10.
And you can ask all of your questions and, give them a few drinks and see if you can get it out of it. Go ahead.
All right. My question is basically for Tom, sir. Is there any ship you really enjoyed working on more than any of the others recently? Since I know there's been a lot of new content.
Yeah, so I am, my full title on STO is the lead artist for the ship and UI teams, and it's kind of a convoluted path how I became that. But, in terms of actually getting to make ships, I haven't gotten to do that quite as much as I would like lately, because I've been managing UI artists, filling in gaps and things, and also managing the ship team. One of the things I'm really proud of that I didn't work on myself, but kind of helped make happen was the recent update to the Excelsior. Recently, we completely revamped the model of the USS Excelsior and the Enterprise B in the game. That was done by Tobias Richter. We contracted him to do that. He also did our new exterior DS9 model, and it's a beautiful ship, and Tobias did a beautiful job, and I'm glad to finally have that up to par with some of our other newly redone ships.
Also exciting because working with a really talented outsourcer like that really opens some doors with potential possibilities for us.
Yeah, that won't be the last ship you see from Tobias.
Yeah.
Real quick, I want to throw in here another online question. Pax Federotica asks, will we finally get to meet Captain Killy, meaning like actually the mirror version, as well as Tilly? A lot of viewers, myself included, were disappointed that 1, we never got to see Killy on the show, and 2, she apparently died like a chump off camera. Discovery will correct both of these things.
Well, I can definitely say that when we were watching the show, we all fell in love with the idea of Captain Killy. So I can't say for certain if Captain Killy will show up, but definitely stay tuned on Sunday to see what Al and Mary have to say. And nothing is off the table right now.
Awesome. And we do now have a working relationship with Mary Wiseman, so maybe we can convince her to do it.
Just throwing out there, hearing that Mirror Rita and Captain Killy time travel shenanigans. My question is, I played Star Trek Online with I got in with the launch, like kind of, I guess, 8 years ago-ish.
Almost 9.
Thank you.
And I've been playing off and on. I'm mostly kind of the free-to-play at this point. I was kind of curious though, when I do come back in and I'm seeing kind of all of this new content and these new systems that are being kind of put into place and kind of experiencing that and being a little bit overwhelmed with just the sheer amount of stuff that you guys have made over this, is there any type of balance that you're kind of hoping for the new player, like trying to balance of what is available and things like that? Because, I mean, a lot of the times I'll come in the middle of something and I'll see the featured episode, which is awesome, but I want to maybe make sure that I get caught up back to that stuff. And just kind of a new player experience, or even returning old player.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, absolutely. When an MMO gets to be this many years old, we understand that there can be so much there for a new player. It can be absolutely overwhelming. As we start to move forward, we've started to make the new player experience a much larger focus for us. I don't know how many details I'd like to go into just now because it's still a work in progress, but absolutely, that sort of stuff is on our radar, certainly. And we are looking forward. I mean, Age of Discovery is a great opportunity for us to bring in new Trek fans that may have only come on board with the franchise as a result of Discovery. And if we're going to be marketing ourselves alongside of that, we know that we need to make the game as approachable as possible. That has always been one of our goals, is to make the game as approachable. Like you can get the baseline of understanding it. It'll take a lifetime to master everything that's in there, but we hope that anybody can hop right in and have a good experience. And the better we can make that in the future.
And I want to add to that game development, especially service game development, like a massive multiplayer game, is always a struggle between finding the time to make something new and finding the time to make something old better. And you know, we really, and especially based on your team size and stuff, you're always trying to balance those two things. And sometimes you have to really focus on the new thing, right? And sometimes you do get time to go back and clean up old stuff. So that's always I hesitate to use the word struggle, but in some ways it is. It's just prioritizing one of those things over the other. And so, yeah, we know that there are definitely areas of the game related to that could be cleaned up and should be cleaned up. And we're hoping over the next 6 months or so, as we do focus on getting the Age of Discovery spun up, that we'll have opportunities to do more of that.
But also, you know, with the landing page that we just released with Victory's Life, you know, we're already trying to help people who've potentially been away for a while figure out where they were, so they can continue the game. And we've been also talking about improving like the in-game help system, so that way, if you don't know how to do something, there'll be a central location where you can actually look it up and get all the information you need.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I want to throw in a quick question as well, because I actually know the answer to this one, but I just love the story so much.
That's cheating.
No, so, hey, I'm not the cheat, I'm the moderator. But yeah, this is such a great story. I wanted to make sure we talked about it while we were up here. We were talking a bit about Victory's life and kind of how in the storytelling, you guys have really tried to pay attention to the small details, and you talked a bit about like Garrick and improvements and things like that. But there was a story about a particular restaurant on the promenade.
Yeah, so one really cool thing about the process of recreating DS9 was that while Nick, did we use some? He was taking a picture, but now he's vanished.
One of our wonderful environment artists.
He was doing a lot of research on DS9 through all the seasons. And one thing that really came up was they kept using the same kind of section of promenade over and over and over again, and just like changing up the stalls for whatever their needs were.
Just signs.
So when he was trying to build the whole thing as a loop, he had to kind of place buildings or various stalls that would have been on the same location, but just spreading it out. One of which was the Klingon Deli. Now, once the Klingon Deli was added, it was completely empty, and we were like, well, we gotta put someone in there. So I started talking to the character art team about, let's see if we can get like as close a representation of the Klingon chef put in there. So we got him. It was awesome. It looks great. And then we need to figure out what's he doing. So I spoke with Weston, our animator, and said, well, here's like the most iconic moment with the Klingon chef. He is playing his like little accordion, and he's just, you know, going to town, having a ball. And was like, I think if I get the model, I can make this happen. And he had to cheat a whole bunch of tricky things because rigging is complicated. And I am not an artist, so I have no idea how to explain any of it. But he and Ian Castaneda, our character artist, made it. They made it happen, and now there he is, just dancing and having a wonderful time. And that just all came from like, how can we take this little bit of extra set dressing and make it that much better? And I'm really happy that it worked out the way it did.
I just love those little details. You got a question here?
So you mentioned there's over 800 ships in the game, and we've seen over the years a lot of change in those ships, especially with Tier 6, now Intel Command, and all these changes in the game, trying to keep it balanced for all the players. I'm curious, with new content, you mentioned new playstyle for the new ships. Can you kind of tell us about like a day in the life of how to plan what those ships are from like a mechanical perspective, like movement, speed, attack, not necessarily the cruisers and stuff, but just the balance is hard.
It's mostly my team's work. A lot of that is actually inspired by the art. It comes down from, usually by the time that we've decided we're going to make a certain ship, we get at least a concept made at some point. And the sizes of the ship and the cannon classifications even can usually factor into at least informing a lot of the early decisions. Like, is this a battle cruiser? Is it an escort? Is it a destroyer? Where are we going to go with this particular ship? And sometimes just because of scheduling things, those are decisions that don't get made until even after Thomas's team is completely done with it. He already knows what the ship is, and I just go with his recommendations.
Right. It's a bit of a snake eating its own tail though sometimes, because it's easier when we have a cannon ship like the Crossfield or the Walker class or whatever. When we're taking something like the Herc and starting complete from scratch, then that I think does start with you guys to figure out like, okay, well what do the Herc do? What's their shtick?
Right.
Right. And then when we know that, then it's easier for us to figure out, okay, well if they need to behave like this, then they should look like that.
Right. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but in the Herc ship's art, a lot of the pieces of it look like pieces of other Herc ships. And that's not just Thomas's team being lazy. That's on purpose. Because one of the early ideas of the Herc was that we didn't end up going with this because it ended up being hard to play against, was when you destroy them, they become smaller ships. And then you have to destroy those, and those become smaller ships. And you have to keep going like that.
It's like Fantasia with the
brooms.
Or those like Russian dolls.
Yeah, Russian dolls, yeah.
So that's why you see a lot of the art elements in the bigger Herc ships look like just smaller ships smashed together with new elements added.
I do want to say, I really wish we could talk more about this, but we've been prototyping some really exciting new stuff that I think we'll see later this year that is completely new types of ships that play very differently from anything we had before. And it was really fresh air for us to get that.
Getting the opportunity to prototype new things for a game that's this far along is always exciting.
So I'm chomping at the bit for you guys to see it because it is, it's pretty incredible. So.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we've got another question for you from Trenton readers. And I'm realizing that all of our readers are like super sarcastic. Maybe I'm just picking the sarcastic ones, I don't know. So Zeus Legion asks.
Oh, God.
The intern community manager recognizes all these names.
Kale already knows.
Will any of the missions explain the Klingon baldness mystery? I see he's talking about it in Discovery. Is it just Q having fun, a result of genetic tampering, or something more?
We don't talk about upcoming content.
Honestly, I don't even know if we know. I don't know. CBS knows.
It's, no.
You know, just give the warp answer, right?
Right, we don't talk about it.
I think that's a fair answer.
Hi. You were talking about the balance between upgrading old content and generating new content. And with the new discovery thing, is there going to be any love given to Kronos, since Kronos features so heavily in discovery and the graphics are absolutely brilliant on the TV? Can we see some of that nice darkness coming to?
Again, I don't know any details of Age of Discovery or ready to release just yet, but I can say that has been a subject of conversation. I don't know if it's going to be something that we end up having time to deliver on, but we also love seeing Kronos in that light.
I would say it's pretty much a certainty that if in the consequence of Age of Discovery and whatever missions we come out with through the whole sequence of that release, how many ever months and into next year that happens, if we go to Kronos, we're going to have to make it look like what you see on the show.
Big excuse for us to do that too.
So whether or not we're planning to do that in the short term, we can't really say. But if we do go there, it should look like what we saw on Discovery.
Yeah.
Are there ever going to be tribbles, like a tribble problem?
Well, actually, you should talk about the trouble.
We do have tribbles in the game. since launch, we've had essentially tribbles you can pick up kind of as loot. As you're adventuring, as you're picking up gear that drops off of enemies that you defeat, occasionally you'll be fortunate or unfortunate enough to find a tribble among their leftovers. And if you leave that tribble unattended in your bag with any item of food, you will soon find you have 2 tribbles, and maybe 4 tribbles later on. It can become a bit of a hassle in the inventory management, but it's a fun little mini game. You can actually breed better tribbles, and petting them gives you small buffs, things like that. So it's actually a small little kind of an Easter egg that's been in the game since the beginning.
We actually had a Kelvin tribble.
I was about to mention that, because that was my idea, and I just went around to a bunch of different people, and it was not scheduled.
Hey, can we do this?
Yeah, hey, can we do this, and we do this, and everybody got on board. And so there's a Kelvin timeline tribble, and if you pet it, like a lens flare shows
Lens
up.
flare.
So, I mean, it is probably possible that we will have at least some form of discovery tribble, but we have not planned it yet, so.
Maybe they'll just shower you with fortune cookies or something.
Or at least fortune cookie wisdom.
Great.
Hello, how are you today?
Hi, great, how are you?
I have a question from a lot of people I've spoken to, which regards the loss of the exploration that we had in some of the earlier years, and we missed it. Is there any chance we're going to be seeing any of it coming back? Or areas of exploration?
Yeah, so what you're referring to, the Genesis system, was a lot of randomly generated maps and missions, basically using a somewhat complicated keyword system to try and put things together in a manner that makes sense. The truth of the matter is 90% of the time it didn't make any sense. So
the 5th board dynasty.
Yeah,
is a shining example.
Go retrieve the artifacts for the board.
Right.
Well, I appreciate that.
There was a certain charm to it.
Yeah, fair enough so. And I really did feed a little bit back into the original series where it was more of discovery as much as being the style of people.
Yeah, we made the decision for multiple reasons at one point to turn all that off, not the least of which was we were planning to move to console, and all of those randomly generated missions took up a huge amount of install space that we couldn't really, we didn't find tenable for the quality that was related to them. But we have already undertaken some efforts to try and revitalize that or come up with a new form of exploration that we can fit in the game. So far, those explorations, those experimentations internally haven't borne any fruit, but it is something that we're very interested in getting. Exploration is central to the Star Trek experience. And while there's plenty of exploration in the game we have in the form of building out your captain and your ship and exploring different ways to play the game, actually being able to just fly to a new planet and see what's there, we'd all love to see that.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to do in an online game space, but it is something we continually think about and would love to tackle.
It is definitely something that, because we respect our fan base, we don't want to half-ass.
Yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
Well, you just did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. So let me first off say I absolutely love your game. I've been playing it since launch.
Thank you.
And one of the cool things about it is in Delta Rising, we got the quantum slipstream technology, which made your ship faster, which I just absolutely love. With Age of Discovery, will we be seeing use of the spore drive?
Well, so on the Crossroad class ship that is in the game, it does have a form of this that you can use for essentially transwarping around the galaxy. I don't know that we would ever disseminate that widely because of canon restrictions. Like the Discovery and the ill-fated Glenn were the only ships that ever had access to this technology. So I don't think that even within the universe, I don't know that it would make much sense for that to be disseminated widely.
And I think CBS probably has pretty tight reins over who can have a sport cut.
Yeah, we also don't know the actual fate of Mycelium Network or anything.
Right.
The fact that it doesn't feature in any of the other series could just be kind of a retcon, but it could be that something happens, and we don't even know that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're also waiting for them to unbreak canon by introducing the spore drive from Discovery, right?
Right.
So we're like, it's going to happen anytime now.
Right.
Sure. So, since STO is an MMO, the easy thing to do is lots of shooting and lots of blowing up bad guys. How difficult is it, or how challenging is it to bring the more optimistic view of Star Trek to a game like this? And how do you balance the mechanics of a video game with telling Star Trek stories that have more optimism and seek peace?
So, yeah, you're totally right. I mean, it's as a game, there definitely is an expectation for a certain amount of combat, because that's why a lot of people play games. But no, I guess part of Star Trek, we are always trying to come up with stories that embody the hope and the morals of kind of Gene Roddenberry's kind of utopian views. I mean, if you've played through Victory's Life, I mean, sure you're fighting Kirk, but at the end of the day, spoilers for guys who've gotten too far into it, you are trying to find a peaceful solution to solve the Kirk problem. So I think we are always trying, like, because we are all fans of Star Trek, we are trying to kind of embody the ideals of the show.
If you think about the episode Darmok, there's this, at the very beginning of the episode, there's this communication breakdown, and the Temerians kidnap Picard and send him to the planet's surface, and he's there with the Temerian captain, and they have a peaceful motive. Like, they want to foster understanding, and they're doing it the only way they know how. But tensions continue to escalate with the Enterprise and Riker in command, and shots are actually exchanged. I think Temerians shoot the shuttle and stuff like that. And writ large, that's sort of what we do with Star Trek stories, where people, the different factions and alien races and things, they have their agendas, and they have, their motives for doing what they do, and it's sort of, we have to have that comment in there, like you said, because it's in the mode, but the way we resolve all these stories is trying to find a way beneath all of that aggression and figure out, okay, what's the real problem here, and how can we solve that in a way that is peaceful and optimistic. And I think the Iconian War, how we resolved that, I think was a great testament to kind of the Star Trek way of storytelling, where you have this super powerful, super aggressive species, and then we found out why they are that way, and we do what we can to fix it. And then when we do that, they understand that, that this was sort of, this wasn't how things were supposed to go. So we try our hardest to balance those two concerns. It is a tightrope for sure.
And generally speaking, we try our best not to make missions that are just go to the system and blow up 20 Klingon ships. Although in Discovery, maybe that would fit. But the combat, the conflict is usually just a backdrop to reflect the stakes of the actual story.
I mean, we've probably actually had more like missions where you shoot to disable or stun than probably any other game.
Right.
Thank you.
It's funny, I think that was an awesome question and really interesting answer you guys gave. It's funny because we do giveaways of ships and different things on Trek Movie quite a bit, giving out codes for the game. And I always, when I run them, I always ask people to tell me why you think like the Iconians are awesome or whatever. I have them tell me something. And there's always two groups of people. There's one group of people I often say, what would you use your T6 ship for? And one group will say, I would use it to conquer all other people in the entire galaxy. And then there's the other people who say, I would use it to go and explore and help other people and help my friends in the game. It's just funny. There's definitely these two camps that you can play in two different ways if you want to. Question?
First off, love the game. I actually brought my console with me so I can play during my downtime. Speaking strictly from a console point of view, is there any way you can make the LB and the L trigger customizable? I have 7 different characters, and the basic maneuvers is in a different spot for all of them, and just with all the choices, all the different powers and things that you can use, they're all in different spots for each character, and it's difficult. Like while I'm playing, and then I switch to another character, I'm playing with them, and I hit the wrong power, or I use the wrong ability.
Are you talking about the radio menu?
Yeah, with the left button and the left trigger, the basic maneuvers is in 7 characters. It's in a different location on each character, and it gets a little frustrating to use. Yeah. Is there anything you can do about that?
We can look into it. I'm not sure how much of that is tied up in certain requirements we have for certain in terms of like commands analogous to certain buttons, and it might not be a problem that we could, and it might be something we can fix, but
Yeah.
you'd have to dig into it, but I will do that for you.
Part of this might be kind of an artifact of our transfer to console. There was so much game to try and fit on a tiny little controller that some choices may have been made there that we can go back and revisit.
Yeah, I understand that completely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey guys.
Hi, Terry.
Good to see you. My question is, I was thrilled to be able to play in Victory's Life. As you know, I tend to play for story and not for battle.
Yeah.
And your stories were amazing.
Thank you.
I know you had touched on it in an earlier question, but the Ferengi mission.
Yep.
It's really the first time I've seen you guys use session play, where you take over another character. You're not playing yourself. Do you think that will open the storytelling into your character being able to take on other characters in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that we actually first experimented with this in an earlier off-season episode called Renegades with Rhett, where you play as Zenkethi Renegade. And then for kind of, I hesitate to say perfected, but we got closer to perfecting it with Magnificent Ferengi. We're at the point now with that technology that I think a lot of us are very excited about the possibilities that we can bring to the game.
Definitely.
Playing as, potentially as celebrities like you did with Magnificent Ferengi. The hesitance, if there is any hesitance there, is that we don't want to take away the experience of you being you, you being your captain in your Star Trek show. So if we overdid it, and every episode was you becoming somebody else, you lose some of that.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we want to use with care, but at the same time, we've also thought about things like, oh, you're going to control a robot, so we can have you session play into that, or, I mean, we also did it a bit with the Binary Circuits PvE mission, where you could actually become a Borg and attack the other team, which was, I think, somewhat well taken.
Yeah.
So, no, we definitely are always looking for new ways to use the technologies that we kind of come up with, because, it gets more bang for buck. But yeah, no, we definitely want to see how we can tell better stories all the time.
And if I can just get in trouble for a second, Blue Sky, I mean, one of the other ways we could use it that's not really the story is maybe we could do a cool queue where like one person is a Borg cube and everybody else is their normal ships, and you have to fight that one, asymmetrical combat kind
I've
of
always
thing.
had this, well, since we started working on the tech, I've had the thought of like historical reenactments where you could play as Kirk's Enterprise or some sort of situation.
So those are all
possibilities.
Right, possibilities we haven't really discussed or investigated them very deeply at all. Like
no promises.
It's a really cool way.
I understand. I just thought it would open up a lot of doors for unique storytelling.
Definitely. I mean, I think we've all talked about at some point, to various levels of joking around, at some point being able to play a space-like game. By using this.
Cool. Thanks much.
Thank you.
I kind of want to pick up on that, the idea of the way that you tell stories a little bit. Because that's, to me, very much the heart of what Star Trek is. It's all about the stories that they're telling, and it's a lot about Star Trek Online as well. It's like all these stories you get to interact and be a part of. And we were talking a bit off stage about Victory's Life, and how what Deep Space Nine did for Star Trek was that it added a lot of things to the way that Star Trek told stories. And I wanted to ask you guys to talk a bit about how that type of storytelling, how those influences from the show have affected the way that you've been telling stories, particularly like in Victory's Life, in online.
I mean, I think there's probably like two parts to that. DS9 is when we really started moving away from episodic content into serialized content, and I think that's always been a very strong, that influenced storytelling in television and games in general.
Well, I think since the beginning of Star Trek Online, we've had a more serialized story.
Yeah, because of that.
Yeah.
And so that definitely has influenced us. But I think the thing about DS9 is that it's a lot more about the people and the relationships between the people. And I think we try to bring as much of that to our game as possible, because again, we love these characters. We couldn't have told it.
this story of Kira and Odo, and their tumultuous relationship and how it all comes together, without kind of that emphasis on the characters that DS9 gave us. So, I think it's really helped us, create a nice solid story for all the different characters and your place in all of that.
DS9 in particular also kind of brought a grayness to the Star Trek franchise that hadn't really been explored a lot. TMG touched on it a little bit on some of their episodes, but there was, like, by the Pale Moonlight or Rocks and Shoals, there were quite a few episodes of Deep Space Nine where you as a viewer might have felt a little uncomfortable with the subject matter about being asked to second guess your own moral and how would I behave in this situation? Did they do the right thing? Maybe they didn't, but can I still respect them for that? All those sort of questions. There's a very strong part of Deep Space Nine's storytelling overall. And we tried to do that a bit of that in Victoria's Life as well. Odo makes some really bad decisions for very good reasons during this whole storyline.
And Garrett's the only one who understands.
Yeah.
Well, if I can piggyback off that a bit, I mean, the other thing that DS9 really understood that I actually think modern TV doesn't understand nearly as well is that good storytelling, kind of like good cooking, is about contrasts, right? Contrasting flavors, right? And so you have those gray moments, you have the despair, you have the, oh God, how are we going to get out of this? But then you have Take Me Out to the Holiday.
Yeah.
You have these joyful, you have
the Magnificent Ferengi.
Right, the Magnificent Ferengi, Worf and Dax's wedding, right? And so, so in a microcosm, we did that with Victory's Life too, where we have the Herc invasion, and it's bleak, and no, it's terrifying. But then we have the Course Level 7, where it's just a fun heist episode, and there's some hilarious moments in it. So it's balancing the ups and downs, and DS9 was really, really good about that.
Also, I'll say, just bouncing off of Jeremy's comments about being morally gray, I think we also were able to use that influence for our Ranking with Regret mission, because we got a lot of feedback from people about how uncomfortable they felt just mowing down civilians as thinking of the Renegade, and like that was the point. Like, you're not supposed to feel like a hero doing that.
The whole story was, why did she defect?
Yeah,
Why did
she left because she realized she was going too dark on the grayscale, and I feel that actually came across, and that's why all that could only happen because of the inspiration of shows like DS9. Yeah.
Well, I have another question from one of our Trek movie readers. This is from Rachel Amber Bloom, who is asking also about storytelling. And she says, do you usually write a story and then try to get those voice actors? Or do you write a story with voice actors that you have in mind at the time?
So it's kind of a bit of both. We try to figure out the macro story definitely before we figured out who our voice acting cast will be. And we use that macro story to try and help us figure out what actors we really want to try and get into that story and who would fit best. But once we kind of have that idea, we actually have to start working on the content with the assumption that we're going to get that actor, but before we've actually successfully gotten the contract, and then we just kind of cross our fingers and hope that they'll say yes.
We do have several backup plans and contingency valves and stuff where it's like, okay, well if they don't sign, then maybe it can be this character, and like 2 or 3 layers of that depending on the story.
Right, to put it into context of like Ryan's saying about the macro story, the story of Victory Life was always going to be focused on the Jem'Thar, and it was always going to be about the Herc invasion of the Gamma Quadrant and how the Dominion has to deal with all of that. And all of that whole story could technically have been told without a single celebrity voice actor. I don't think it would have been nearly as impactful, obviously, but we had enough ideas there that if we couldn't get for certain actors, other choices could be made to tell the same stories, or very similar at the very least.
Except Kirby.
Well, we have a few more minutes, and so I wanted to see if you guys maybe wanted to talk about either the thing that you've been most excited to work on lately, or maybe like the thing you've been most frustrated with, and what's keeping you up at night.
Oh, that we can talk about?
That you can talk about.
Well, I can say, one of the interesting things about Star Trek Online is that it's putting all of these different pieces of Star Trek into the same context, which has weird side effects. When you look at for example, the Enterprise shows up at the very end of season 1 of Discovery. The ships in Discovery are much larger than they were in the original series, including the Enterprise. They scaled it up by maybe 150% at least. And so if we were ever, this is not an official announcement, but if we were ever to put that version of the Enterprise in the game, we have to figure out, okay, what size is it? Is it the size you saw on the show? Does it match the size of the Enterprise, the Constitution class we already have in the game? So,
or that's also considering like whether or not pieces can be interchanged.
Right. So there are all these huge questions that come up when approaching new content like this that we have to figure out. It sort of reminds me of when Kenner was making Star Wars toys in the early 80s. They had to figure out, how does a stormtrooper get into an AT-AT even though the AT-AT is 50 feet tall or whatever. And so just weird things like that. It's like, okay, it looks cool on the screen, but now how do we make it work?
That's actually practical.
Right.
Yeah, that's funny that you bring up the ship size thing. That's something that, one of the things that people often complain about in terms of like changing a canon, it seems like the ships have just gotten bigger and bigger. As I'm sure in like the Kelvin.
That's also true in Star Trek Online.
One thing I'm wondering though, how do you know how big the ship is? Like you see the Enterprise on, when it came in Discovery, like how do you know that it's whatever 150%?
Yeah, we're lucky that we just get those numbers directly from CBS now. I mean, in the past, it's one of those things that's very different from making content based on the 30 or 50-year-old TV show, where you have 30 years of people arguing about that stuff online, and there's generally a fan consensus about, okay, the Enterprise is almost 1,000 feet long, like the Constitution class Enterprise. And then when you had people like Mike Okuda, Doug Drexler, Rick Sternbach working on the Next Generation, they cared about that stuff, so they knew exactly how long the Enterprise D was. It wasn't just like
about this big.
Yeah, about this big, right? And so those numbers kind of got codified in like the TNG Tech Manual and all that stuff, right? And then the people working in Discovery now, John East is actually he'll be here today or tomorrow talking about all his work on Discovery and the development timelines. But he's a huge Star Trek fan and he knows how important that stuff is. And so those guys have a really clear idea of how big their ships are, and we get that direct from them, those numbers. And Eagle Moss, they also want to know how big the ships are. So when they're making stuff now for Star Trek, they understand that scale is important to the fans, and they do.
Size does matter.
Size does matter. so we are going to just get that through. Like they make a declaration, okay, Discovery is this long, the Enterprise is this long, and we know it. Okay, that's how long it's made.
Have you had to guess any ships in the recent past?
We fudged things a little bit. I think we made the Maquis Raider a little bigger than it actually is, so that we fudge it in the sense of like, if there is dispute online for fans, whether or not like, oh, it's this big or that big, then I just pick the number I like.
Yeah, how big is Deep Space Nine?
Right,
it depends on who you ask.
Right.
It depends on which episode.
Well, I feel like I remember people, like the environment team telling me that like on different episodes of DS9, like you have like the Defiant and DS9 next to each other as a relative scale, and that's relative scale is completely different.
Right.
Yeah.
There are shots of the Defiant where DS9 looks very, very small, and then there are shots with the Enterprise D is docked at the upper pylon, and DS9 looks huge comparatively, because the Defiant is a much smaller ship than the Enterprise, but it also has its own scale problems. So really, I guess the moral of the story is scaling issues are not a new problem for Star Trek, and will probably persist into the distant future.
We just have a couple minutes left here on stage, so I wanted to get to your question.
Would it be interesting to see in Age of Discovery what the Empress Georgia's ship Sharon looked like? Possibly, you guys get to that way.
Yeah.
But
so
I
ship scales.
Yeah. I actually just wanted to tell you guys, DS9 is my favorite show for Star Trek, and I think you guys hit it on the dot with Victory's Life. I actually really felt like I was back in the show. As many times as I watched it, it was like, this is really cool. It's an awesome continuation of the show. So I just want to give you guys kudos for that, because it was fantastic to play as a Jonar. It was fantastic to actually interact with all these characters. I really actually felt they were the same ones from the show, especially like how Kira's storyline transitioned through the expansion. And my only question is, how do I get a shirt like that?
These?
Yeah.
Oh, no, these were just
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to hear that kind of thing. We also actually heard some of that from the actors that we brought in.
Yeah, they want our shirts too.
No. about us really feeling like a Deep Space Nine. I think one of them even said, like, this is probably the closest to a Deep Space Nine movie we're ever going to get.
Yeah, Chase said that.
Yeah, and just that it felt like coming home, like it was another season on the series and all like that sort of stuff. It was great to hear that directly from the ones that played these roles for so long.
Do we have time for a little bit more?
Yeah, we have like 2 more minutes.
Nice. Okay, so I did want to ask, because I kind of hogged that what keeps you awake at night question with the scale stuff, but can we go down the line and ask what you're most proud of for Victory's Life?
For Victory's Life?
Yeah.
I'm really proud of the way that the Wingman ship mechanic came together for the Dominion. Early on in our playtesting of the Dominion content, we just kind of randomly, I think, decided that during this mission, you are part of a strike team. There's 2 other ships that are flying with you and helping you out with your objective. And everybody that played through it was like, I really like this. I love these ships following me along. I would like to have them permanently, please. And it was very hard to pull together. But in the end, we were able to come up with a really cool ship mechanic that's unique to the Gempire ships, where you are always part of the strike team. You have 2 wingmen that follow you around and follow your orders and do certain maneuvers on your command. It's really paid off. It's a really great experience.
Actually, and they don't tell you to do a barrel roll every 5 minutes.
I saw that thing on STO builds, I think it was this morning or yesterday. It was like, here's how you make a ship with 58 pets. And it was a Gemini carrier, because you have a wingman and a strike, the attack craft and all that stuff. So that was really fun.
I mean, definitely for me, the crowning achievement was working on Force 7. It was a lot of work, a lot of late nights just trying to make it all work. And I think it all came together at the end. And there were a few things that came pretty hot. I think we got the music for that episode like 2 days before we launched. It was.
We weren't able to license Sabotage.
Yeah. But I mean, it was something that I worked on, Weston worked on. I think at some point all of our environment artists were working on it. We had a lot of character work, a lot of systems work. It was just intense.
It was easily the most complicated episode that we've ever done in Star Trek Online, in terms of just man hours and disciplines involved.
Which is why we're definitely not using it to set the bar, because yeah, that's a little unachievable. So as for things that keep me up at night, I'm currently working on the nuclear experience, for Age of Discovery, and this is my first time working kind of on a nuclear experience, and man, it toils hard.
Yeah,
it is a lot of work.
I think of all the things that the questions that a new player might have as they're playing the game for the very first time.
And as someone asked earlier, how do we make it easier for people to kind of get to understand what's going on? We really want to make sure that we're hitting all those points, and the players aren't going to get lost, and that it's not going to just turn into a race to quit the game. So it's
in the midst of all that, also selling the Discovery fantasy.
So it's that is it's a really interesting and exciting challenge.
Well, I think that's a pretty good note to end on. Glad we got a little bit of extra time to make sure we got to everyone's questions. Let's thank these guys again for for the Age of Discovery panel. All these burning questions that y'all have that they can't say much about, maybe they can say a little bit more about it at that time. And again, be sure to hit up the Star Trek Online booth in the vendor's room where they're giving away codes for bridge officers. So definitely check that out.
It's holographic recreations of Garrett, Bashir, and Kira. So if you'd like them on your crew, come get them.
And I have it on good authority that Sunday's panel will be expletive awesome.
And meet the devs tonight at 8 at the bar. That's
And thank you to all of you for coming out, because I know I'm not really that interesting of a person, so thank you.
Ryan, you were the most interesting one.
And track movie.
Yeah, you track movie.
One more round of applause for that, please. What a great match. Thank you. All right, so up next